Let's see.
Eileen, are you able to talk? Are you there?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Good.
I can hear you.
There we go.
Okay, you're live. Take it away.
So are we ready to start our meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Oops. So I'll be acting chair tonight since Commissioner Lauterbach is not with us in this meeting. He's excused. So do we do the roll call first, or is that after?
You need to call it to order.
Okay, and then we'll do the roll call. All right. So I am calling the 397th regular meeting of the College Place Planning Commission to order. And then I will ask Ms. Holm to do the roll call.
So it's called to order at 7:06. So Commissioner Brennis,
Here.
Commissioner Olson,
Here.
Commissioner Rose,
Present.
Commissioner Reiswig,
I'm here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here?
and not present is Commissioner Poyman and Lauterbach. Also present is John Rickard, myself, Lisa Niesel, City Clerk, and Greg Dorn with Greg Dorn and Associates.
Okay. So the first item is on our agenda is the consent agenda. Well, actually, even before that, is there anybody that has any public comment? Is there any member of the public out there?
I have none. John, what about you?
I have not received any public comment prior to the meeting.
Okay, then since there's none, let's move on to the consent agenda. And I'll hear a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, everybody say aye. If you're
Aye.
in favor,
Aye.
All right. Now the next item is to approve the minutes from the July 21st agenda.
So that's all in one motion. The consent agenda is all in one motion.
Oh, that was one motion? All right.
Yeah, is that what you were intending?
Well, I called for a motion to approve the agenda, but yeah, so I guess the whole thing, that's fine. So then we move on to the regular agenda. Sorry that I haven't had much experience running the meetings.
Okay.
The consent agenda, the first item, I mean, not the consent, the regular agenda, recreational vehicle standards. And so I'll ask John to give us the report.
Well, I'll just turn it over to Greg and let him go ahead and take it from here.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And let me know if you have difficulty hearing me. I was just on another call and apparently folks weren't able to hear me clearly. So hopefully we have a better connection now. This first item, the RV park standards, you've seen and discussed in previous meetings. We made some additional revisions based on your comments at the last meeting. added language regarding the maintenance of the RV parks and the individual RV units. We added some provisions tied to the business license to make to enable the city to hold park operators accountable for compliance. We added a specific standard of 300 square feet of open space per recreational unit, which is the same standard that mobile and manufactured home parks have to meet. We made a 20-foot setback requirement around the perimeter of the park, and we added a requirement that the RVs must be at least 20 feet away from vegetative hedges. We tried to accommodate or come up with language to tie that last setback to vegetation that was prone to combustion, but that proved to be difficult to do. And so we just went with 20 feet from vegetative hedges. And so that may not correspond exactly with what you had in mind. And so hopefully either this modified language will be acceptable, or we could just take it out, depending on your direction. But you've now seen it a couple of times, and if there's any other questions or comments, I think we'd be ready to move to the next item. But certainly let's start with questions or comments.
Is there a need, John, for us? Is there a need for us to like recommend this to council to have a motion, or no?
No, not at this time. At such a time that you're all comfortable with moving it forward, we'll put out a draft for public comment. So we'll have a comment period of 14 days, and then hold a public hearing, which will be interesting considering COVID, but we have a process set in place for that. So at some point this fall, we'll bring something to you as a final package to take forward and ask for a recommendation after you hear the public comment.
I want to know what is considered vegetation. 20 feet from vegetation?
Vegetative hedges.
So what is that considered? Oh, are you saying hedges?
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Commissioner Resnick has his hand raised.
I appreciate the fire prevention wording there. However, does that 20 feet setback from all edges, does that then count in their public space? Because I'd hate to burn up a significant amount of property if they chose to use a fence or something else for their setbacks.
Let me check and see, because I know that we have some language on that. Let's see.
Usually the common open space areas are combined areas that are open for all of the people that are recreating at the park. And so typically you wouldn't count that 20-foot space area. It's more of a buffer from adjacent land uses than considering it as part of the required open space, would be my interpretation.
Yeah, so it could be that if there was a hedge around the perimeter, that 20 feet would also be satisfy the setback requirement, but it wouldn't be the recreational space.
Gotcha. So are those setbacks then in line with other uses?
Yes, they
Commercial-
are.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is a provision on page 4 that says the 300 feet of open space has to be, you can't count the area that's for the exclusive use of individual tenants. You can't include driveways and easements, and the perimeter setback doesn't count for the recreation area. So that is spelled out on page 4.
Yeah, item number 6, I see that again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question, though.
So would you like to discuss accessory buildings?
So before we move on, I'd like to ask a question. One of the things that we're saying is that they cannot build any kind of like shed or storage structure, permanent structure on the RV site. And I'm just wondering if as part of the plan for a new RV park, if they were to build some sort of storage buildings, or would that be allowed if they were on the property to also build some kind of storage buildings?
I would think that would apply and be allowed as an amenity to the park, you know, just like a pool or, you know, a clubhouse would be an amenity. Also providing a storage area for long-term residents would be legitimate use.
All right, so I didn't know if we needed to include any language to do that, or if that's just something that's kind of outright, I guess, common sense allowed.
I'll look through the language to double check to make sure that we're not precluding a shared storage area. It's not uncommon in multifamily developments or senior facilities or things like that to have a building or an area with individual storage inside of that. And I think that's a positive because it alleviates the need then for a bunch of individual little storage units to pop up all over the site.
All right, are there any other comments by any of the commissioners? Questions? If not, let's move on to the second item, accessory buildings.
So this is one we've also discussed at several meetings, and there have been a few revisions to clarify how we're going to deal with accessory buildings on larger lots. But so you can see the changes as they are highlighted. So not a lot of change there, and hopefully what we've done is consistent with previous discussions. So once again, it's a matter if there are any questions or comments on the changes that we've now made.
So no questions or comments from any of the commissioners? I guess we're ready to agree and move on.
Okay, so then there are, I think you have maybe the whole copy of the Uniform Development Code. There's a lot of little housekeeping things in there. one item in particular we wanted to draw to your attention, and it's language from other cities. And it's an area where there can be some confusion because we tend to, with having assessor records now so readily available online, we can look up and see maps, and we can see parcels and the like. But it's important to note that a parcel for tax collection purposes may consist of one or more lots, along with if there was any right-of-way had previously vacated. And so we might look up online and see a parcel, but that parcel, for instance, could have 3 legal lots, all owned by the same individual or family or couple or whatever. And so we've added some language in there that if a parcel is a building or development site, and that a building is going to is proposed and would be on top of one or more of the lot lines, then those lots have to be consolidated, because we don't want to be creating a non-conformity where you have a building sitting on top of a lot, because that doesn't meet setback requirements. So there's some language now that's been added that makes it in those situations where if Randall's parcel, for instance, includes 2 lots, and he wanted to build a house right in the middle, he would then need to consolidate those 2 lots into one single lot, and then you would build the house in the middle. But you can't build the house over the top of lot lines, because that would it would be non-conforming, but it would also create a real headache and a real problem for somebody to solve in the future. So that's probably one of the significant items that are in there. Otherwise, there's a lot of different kind of housekeeping things that address some of the issues that John has encountered as he's been administering the code. So unless there are any particular questions, we have a item that we want to bring up relative to housing. But so I'll stop here to see if there are any questions or comments regarding the miscellaneous code revisions. If there are none, then, Mr. Chair, I could raise the housing related issue.
Yeah, let's proceed.
The table of permitted uses in the code, as you recall, lists a whole number of uses and identifies in what zoning districts the code is, or what zoning district those uses are permitted or not permitted. But a question has come up, and this is one that is several communities that are dealing with now, which is, should multifamily development be permitted in the general commercial zone? The code as written now says that you can have multifamily development in the commercial zone as a part of a mixed-use development, where you would have commercial on the ground floor, and you would then have housing in the upper floors. But the question has been raised, what about if a property owner wants just to build multifamily housing without the commercial component. And that's a policy issue. Some communities have permit multifamily housing without it being part of a mixed-use development in commercial zones because they recognize the shortage of housing in the community and affordable housing, and they want to do everything they can to provide a range of housing opportunities. For some individuals, living in an apartment that's in a commercial zone is highly accessible and enables them to, walk to the store or walk for dining and things like that. So it might be attractive from that standpoint. And some sites, just because they are zoned commercial, aren't necessarily suitable for commercial development, particularly if they are not highly visible or readily accessible to people that only would go there infrequently. So it is a way of helping to infill on lots that aren't necessarily highly suitable for commercial development. On the other hand, some communities find that they have a limited amount or supply of commercially zoned land, and by permitting housing as a freestanding use, that potentially diminishes some of their supply of commercial land. So there's pros and cons to this issue, so we wanted to raise it for your consideration. And as we do, that brings up some kind of side or secondary issues, things like, well, if I have an apartment in a commercial zone, should I be able to rent it out as a vacation rental? Deb and I, for instance, have stayed in some very nice Airbnbs right in commercial areas in other cities. So there's some side issues too, but the central policy issue is, should multifamily housing without a commercial component be permitted in the commercial zone or not? That's the policy question.
So it's,
Any thoughts or comments by commissioners?
well, I'll start with my comment, I guess, and then allow the other commissioners to chime in after me. But I almost think that it defeats the purpose to allow the multifamily in commercial zones, because normally we've gone through a process in our planning efforts and UGA and all those efforts to designate the different zoning areas. And by doing that, then we are taking away some areas that we thought were, for commercial purposes. For instance, I can think do we want College Avenue to become a lot of multifamily housing as opposed to provide some commercial areas for businesses? Do we want over by the Honda dealership, that commercial zone over there, to become apartments? I mean, it's not necessarily that would be a bad thing per se, but then it will take away the designated areas that are meant to be for commercial areas, which have a positive thing for the city as a whole too. Because normally that would, I don't know, the planning effort, the orderly effort of planning, I think gets kind of thrown away somewhat. And if there is a parcel that is not very well suited for commercial purposes, that's zoned that, then I think that needs to come through a different process, probably to be rezoned. anyway, that's just some ideas I want to throw out there for discussion.
Okay.
I would point out, to your point, Randall, on College Avenue, the downtown mixed use zone, our code does allow individual apartment buildings to be built without a commercial component.
Okay.
But you raised some very good points. I've kind of waffled myself back and forth on this idea. So I'm kind of in the middle. We work really hard. We put infrastructure in place for a lot of these commercial sites, and unfortunately, kind of what we're seeing is that they're just kind of floundering, whether it's not enough rooftops in the area to encourage commercial development to take place in those areas. I don't know. So we wanted to throw this out here as a possibility, see what the commissioners thought about it.
Well, I think that it is not a good idea to have residents in a commercial area. For one thing, the traffic is different. Sometimes you have big trucks that come in to deliver, and you can't determine what kind of commercial we're going to have and intersperse that with residents. I just think it's better. I mean, you have 1 or 2 blocks off of the commercial and you can have residents. That's not too far for anybody to walk. So that's just thinking about traffic and the intermingling of families living in homes and little kids riding tricycles, etc. I just think is not a good thing with commercial.
Other comments or thoughts?
Commissioner Reiswig has his hand raised.
So the question I have is, how easy would it be for somebody, if they wanted to do multifamily in a commercial zone, to acquire the property and then change the zoning? Is that very prohibitive?
Well, it would, anytime you change the zoning or make a request, you have to look at the land use maps. And so in the instances of all of our commercial properties, our land use maps are commercial as well. So it would require them to apply at our annual, when we open up for amendments, and make an application to change the land use and zoning and go through a process. So it's, it would take probably about a year to get through that process.
Okay.
John?
Yes.
There is one other possibility. So what you described is the typical way, which is we look at the future land use map, and if the future land use map said commercial and it's zoned commercial, and someone said, I'd like to rezone it to multifamily, we'd say, well, that's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, so you're gonna have to go back, change the comprehensive plan, then we could change the zoning. And that's where the year of time comes in. If that was an option that we wanted to have available, we could put a provision in the comprehensive plan that says that that if you have a future land use designation of commercial, in addition to zoning it as commercial, it could be rezoned to multifamily under certain circumstances if you wanted to go that route. So there is another way that you could change the plan to enable that to happen, as opposed, on a kind of a global basis, as opposed to having to change the plan on case by case basis. So there's another way of getting to that point if that was something that the commissioners were interested in exploring.
That kind of intrigues me, because when you look at the map, there are a few blocks that logically fairly easily fall into multifamily. There's some that I think should stay commercial, but I think if there was a mechanism that was easy, that might be a little simpler than saying anywhere we can go ahead and do multifamily.
In looking to the future, are we going to stay a small town, or are we going to become a downtown like Walla Walla? I mean, what is our vision?
Well, I think our comprehensive plan, points that we would like to have a more vibrant College Avenue with a mix of residential and commercial along College Avenue. And of course, we're highly motivated to maintain our economic development. So working with property owners to develop commercial sites for retail sales, but they're, and we're shooting for, in the next 20 years, adding another 600 homes or dwelling units, whether those are apartments or houses, single family. We have to continue to grow just to maintain status quo.
But there is one significant difference between the two, in that the future land use map says that you envision that College Avenue would be kind of long and, kind of linear, if you will. It was long, but not wide, whereas downtown Walla Walla has a more of a rectangular or square downtown area. So it has length and width, as opposed to the area focusing on College Avenue, which is really only about a half a block deep on both sides of College Avenue. So the development pattern is a little bit different in College Place than it is Walla Walla.
So what if we designated College Avenue as commercial and one block over residential?
Well, we
What
kind
you
of have
now
that with the downtown mixed use. It allows commercial and multifamily in that zone. And residential's on, I don't have my zoning map up on me, but I think we have some multifamily, I want to say to the east side.
Yeah, you actually have multifamily, on the east side. Almost all of the kind of the first tier beyond to the east is all multifamily, and then on the west side it's some multifamily and some single family. Do you have that zoning map, John? Can you get that up on the screen?
Yeah, I think Carolyn might have just pulled it up shortly. It went away though. There we go.
How's that?
Yeah, so
Yeah, it looks good.
the darker orange areas are your multifamily. The green along College Avenue is the downtown mixed use, which allows for multifamily. And then the kind of pale yellow is the single family residential. There's some areas, so if you take the property that's at the intersection of Garrison Village Way and Myra, the north east property that's in red. No, down a little bit lower, down, yeah, right there in that area. That could be a site. I've had discussions with developers about that possibly being, you know, multifamily or townhomes or assisted living or a retirement community. And there have been some properties on the north side of Commercial Drive that are not, they're just kind of out there on the market. Nobody's interested in developing them as commercial, that might be suitable for multifamily. But I think Greg's suggestion about amending the comp plan to allow that commercial land use for them to apply for a multifamily residential zoning. And then it would be site specific and there would be a hearing. I think because it's site specific, the hearing would be held before the hearing examiner. It wouldn't go before, I don't believe it would go before the planning commission because it would be site specific.
I guess I'm of the opinion that we need to reserve some areas for commercial purposes. And I know that maybe at the present time, there's no developer out there that wants to do that, but you know, maybe 5 years from now there will be. And if we end up taking some of these properties that I think are uniquely suited for commercial businesses, like on Commercial Avenue with the frontage on the highway, or the properties along Myra, again, a major arterial. I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot as a community if we allow them to become multifamily, and then, you know, 5-10 years from now, we don't have commercial zone property. I mean, that's just kind of my thought. And my thought is that if there are some parcels like those on by the villages of Garrison Creek that we think could be, then maybe we need to change the zoning or do a new zoning the next time around that we would allow commercial and or some sort of residential. But I think that we should maintain some that are strictly commercial and not necessarily allow them to go multifamily.
Greg, here's an idea. What if we actually created a separate land use that allowed for commercial and or multifamily, and we identified a few properties that might be appropriate for that land, rather than just, that way the planning commission has some say in which parcels get that land use.
Yeah, that's a good point, John, and there's several different ways that can be done. Some communities have created a future land use designation of mixed use and said, you know, it could be commercial or it could be multifamily, or, you know, for instance, some communities have just done a future land use designation of non-residential and said it's not going to be residential, but whether it's commercial or industrial or something else, we'll leave that open. And then some have done, and you'll see an example of this in a minute, where on the map, if let's say that multifamily is orange and commercial is red, they may just designate some parcels with orange and red stripes, meaning it could could be zoned commercial or it could be zoned multifamily depending on individual cases. So there's several different ways that you can go about keeping some options open. And I think there's some benefit to those. We're talking about housing, but you see that a lot on the business and light industrial, because we have a tendency to think that light industrial uses are going to be more intensive than commercial uses. But in this day and age, you could have a business park that does not have intensive uses at all and has nice design, a lot of pedestrian amenities and things, and then you can have some pretty intense commercial uses. So our visions of commercial and light industrial areas are kind of changing now. So having some flexibility on the future land use map is many communities are finding is a good idea. And so, yes, there's a couple of different ways. If you thought there were some areas that could maybe be commercial or maybe be multifamily, there's a number of different ways we could get to that point.
Well, I think that this needs to be looked at really good, because I'm always looking at children, and you cannot discriminate and say, well, kids can't live in this area.
Right.
And so I just feel commercial is kind of scary as far as having children living there. So I think it needs to be looked at really good.
John and I could, if you'd like, could brainstorm a little bit on this and bring some ideas back to the commission at the next meeting, and with some examples, we could discuss whether they are, good ideas or not. I mean, they might be an appropriate tool, but not the right place, or they may be just what we need. So if you'd like, John and I can brainstorm a bit and bring back some examples for your further consideration.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair, does that seem an appropriate course of action?
I think that, to me, that would be, it also would allow us more time to kind of mull this over as commissioners.
Yeah.
It sounds good to
Okay.
me.
Good. Well then, yeah, so if commissioners could kind of give some thought to this notion of housing and commercial, and John and I will have some discussions and bring back some ideas, as we've done with some of the other issues that have been before you. And that's a great segue, John, into the future land use map, if you can get that up so that we can all see it.
Which one is it of these?
Yeah, the Flume one.
Yeah, that one. So this is going to Commissioner Davis's comments. This is the future land use map. This is the vision of how the city would like to see land uses and development occur. So it includes not only the city limits, but the urban growth area around the city, areas where city services exist or can reasonably be provided. And as we've discussed in previous meetings, the county has created a very difficult situation to deal with when they refused the city's request to add to the urban growth area specifically to allow for additional commercial development in the future. And it also left the city with the situation where the area around Martin Airfield is designated for industrial development, even though there is quite a bit of evidence that to support the notion that that area is not suitable for industrial development. So some changes needed to be made. And so if you look on the left side of the map, the big orange area, that's Martin Airfield. And as we discussed in the last week's meeting, and we'll make some changes to the colors so that they're more easily distinguishable. For some of us, the multifamily color and the color around the airfield might look a little bit similar, and we'll make them more contrasting. But as we discussed in a previous meeting, what this would show is that the area around Martin Airfield, the future zoning would be determined at the time that a master plan is prepared for that area, and the property owner or owners get together and work cooperatively with the city to come up with a specific vision for that area, and then the zoning would be based on that approved master plan. So it keeps the options open. It's one of the tools we just referred to. It's a way of keeping some options open in an area where it's just not clear what the future really holds for that area. And it's been designated on a map as industrial for a long time, and there has been no industrial development out there, and the airfield is not consistent with an industrial designation. So something needs to change, but we don't know what, and we don't know what the plans are of the new property owner are. So this would new designation would buy the city some time and give the property owners out there the opportunity to do some more planning and be able to bring that back to the community in general, and the planning commission in particular, before decisions are made about the zoning. So that's what the significant changes on this map. We have also, you note, left the areas that the county did not approve on the map, because from the city's standpoint, that area 2A along the highway is still highly suitable for commercial development. It still has a brand new city water main serving it, and it's still in the city's water and sewer service areas. And even though the county refused the city's request to include it in the urban growth area, it still is the most logical and appropriate area in the community for commercial development in the future. So it is left on the map as a future urban growth expansion area, so that is an indication of policy to the county that that area would should be added to the urban growth area in the future.
Yeah, Greg, we're going to have to distinguish that area 2A more clearly as a future growth area, so that it's not confusing to potential developers, where they may acquire a piece of property without talking to the city and thinking that it's in our UGA. Don't want that.
We'll put a label right on top of it, John, that says, UGA, UGA expansion area and potential UGA expansion area for 2B, so that the 2B should have a crosshatch on it too, so it's not confusing. So we'll make that change on the map. And one other thing for the Planning Commission to think about, if you look in Area 2B, there are those parcels. What is that? Is that Soaring Hawk, John? What's the name of the Yellow Hawk, Soaring Hawk? What's the subdivision?
So 2B is Soaring Hawk.
Yeah. So there's a number of 1 acre parcels right along the bluff line there that have already been platted as 1 acre lots and have houses on them, and they have their own wells or have their own water system. So as we look to the future, it might make sense to take that out of Area 2B, because there's no reason to have it in the urban growth area, because development has already been set at that suburban level. But that the two large areas where the number 5 is, that would make sense, because they have immediate access to a city water main, and those parcels, should be developed at urban densities and hook up to the water system. So we might want to think about the possibility of making Area 2B smaller, but we'll clearly distinguish it as a future area, because it's, as depicted now, it's confusing. Any questions or comments about the map?
No, I think that's a good approach for the Martin Airfield. I know that kind of left the city with a little bit of a quandary there with the county actions and then the new owner's actions. The other thing, though, that came to mind to understand, we talked about and we incorporated in the proposed changes to the code of a development agreement, I think it's called. Is that right?
Yes, that's been done.
And so is that a mechanism that would allow somebody to enter into a development agreement on a commercial property to actually then do multifamily? Or do they have to remain within the land use?
In the case of the airfield, a development agreement would be a very good tool, because it would be a contract then that would a way of making sure that the master plan is implemented and all the obligations are met by the property owners and by the city. So it would be a very appropriate tool to use a development agreement around the airfield. It's possible you could use a development agreement in the case of allowing multifamily in a commercial zone. You could also accomplish that perhaps with a conditional use permit, where you have some very specific conditions of approval. So there might be some other tools that might be applicable in the case of the multifamily housing, but a development agreement would certainly be a useful tool out at the airfield. I'm involved in a project in another city right now where it's a larger scale project. It was envisioned to be implemented in phases, but it was approved 9 years ago, and just now the market.
Yeah, we lost you, Greg.
I think we lost him.
There we go. Am I back?
You're back
Yeah.
now.
Okay. And so the development agreement is very, very valuable because it recorded specifically, what was agreed to and what was going to happen. And people said, well, I thought it meant that we agreed that I could do this. And I thought we agreed that I could do this. And I thought you said I could do this. And we said, well, fortunately, we have the development agreement. Let's read what it says, because it says specifically what you can and can't do. So it's a useful tool, especially over time when memories kind of fade a little bit or conditions change. And so there's definitely some times when it comes in handy. So that's all that I have, Mr. Chair and John, unless there's other items. As John mentioned before, this is not decision making. This is all of these code revisions. We're going to gathering them all up, and when we're ready, then we'll distribute all of them for public review and comment, and we will have a COVID appropriate public hearing on the comments, and then you'll make a recommendation to the planning commission. So this is just a way of kind of dealing with an issue, setting it aside, dealing with the next one, set it aside until we're ready to bring everything forward. So I'm based on your comments tonight, I think we have some direction on some improvements to make to the map, some research to do on housing and commercial and bring back to you, and to just double check the code to make sure that we haven't inadvertently precluded shared storage facilities in RV parks. And with that, I think I have my marching orders, and I'm ready to get back to work and get ready for your next meeting.
So my vision is for a schedule for this fall is that we'll have one more workshop next month on September 15th. And so we should have all of the revisions bundled together, so you kind of have a final product to look at. I guess we still need to have some further discussion about this whole commercial land use with multifamily. Timing wise, that may be something we need to push off until next year. If it becomes too big of a, Greg and I will have to talk and see how big of a, did we just pull on a loose thread on a sweater and is it going to unravel on us? Because we ideally, I would like to have a final product for you to kind of give your blessing, and then in late September advertise for public comment so that we can hold a public hearing at the October meeting so that we can get this to council in November for final approval. Does that sound too fast tracked, Greg, or do you think we can pull that off?
I think we can do it.
I think that sounds good, John. The one I think is more contentious, at least for me and perhaps for everybody, because we haven't had as much of time to think about, is this idea of the multifamily and commercial zones. But let's see what you guys can bring back, and we'll consider it and discuss it at that time next meeting.
Okay.
Are there any other comments by any of the commissioners or any other ideas?
saw one head shake no.
So,
You can't see my head, but it sounds good to me.
well, if not hearing any comments, then I think I'm ready to adjourn this meeting.
So we
Uh,
need a motion and a second.
A motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
Yes, sir.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second.
Looks like Brian got that one.
At 8:04.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
it looks like we're gonna have a full meeting next time.
Okay.
Wash your hands and keep wearing a mask.
Thank you for
Okay, good
coming,
night.
everyone.